Congress is looking into farm labor needs around the nation, but it is a challenging task. The House Agriculture Committee recently announced the creation of the Bipartisan Agricultural Labor Working Group, which will focus on the workforce issues faced by agricultural producers around the nation. Congressman and farmer Doug LaMalfa of California joins me to discuss the group and the nation's ag labor needs. I'm Sabrina Halvorson. Let's get into this week's AgNet Weekly. We'll just get right into it. I wanted to just get a couple of comments from you about the Ag Labor Working Group that was created. Can you tell me a little bit about the goals of the group?
Well, it's to be successful in advancing an ag labor program that's a heck of a lot better than what we have right now, which, in the United States, we haven't been able to really address this effectively for, nearly 40 years. And we need a formal process for that. So our labor force can, if they're, coming from our southern border area, can come across legally with documents, with a background, and be able to move freely back and forth and know that they're going to be secure here and that the farmer knows they're going to have a secure force. And we don't really have that right now. We have this indefinite way of doing things that subjects to the laborers to bad situations and farmers to uncertainty. So, it's really needed to get this done.
So with being an actual farmer yourself, does that give you a unique perspective on this?
The farming I do, we are not a labor-intensive crop, so it's not something that I have a great firsthand, need or have felt the pain of per se. It's the people with more intensive vegetable crops and orchard crops and many others, or even those that have dairies and such. They really need a larger amount of labor individuals and a stable force. So, this is for many people in agriculture that have that great need for, in some cases, year-round labor or a much larger group of laborers due to the nature of how they grow their crops.
And you mentioned that there hasn't been a big change, I believe you said, in 40 years. Are there a couple of key points that you're looking at right away that you think need some work?
Well, the issue is that when you have folks that have come across without a legal status, then they're vulnerable at any time of possible removal, and then they don't have all the legal rights of a person that would have a work permit, green card like that. And so it isn't good for them. And what the horrific things people have to go through to come across the border, I've been down to the border and seen that, and it's terrible. When people want to come to the promise of this country, I don't blame them. But for our ag labor force, which is a subset of the entire issue, we need to have that stability. So, and we just don't have that. It's getting harder and harder to get labor, and it doesn't appear like there's a lot of American citizens, especially with all the handouts we've been giving out, all these stimulus checks and this and that. It's even harder to get people to work, and so it's important that we be able to have a permitted labor force that can come in and do this necessary work. So that means what we worked at in the two previous attempts at legislation was pretty darn good bill. It addressed that legal status, addressed doing background checks through E-Verify. It addressed cleaning up some of the aspects of H-2A that make it pretty onerous for employers to work through that. I mean, it's a real pain to go through that process, and then there's a lot of hooks and catches on it that some people, regulators, might try and catch people on, even though they're working in good faith. So the direction we went in that bill previously was a pretty solid, pretty positive one for the worker, for the employer. Too.
Is there a timeline involved in putting together the end report for this working group?
I don't think there's a specific one. Obviously, the quicker we can come together and come up with a consensus and say, this is the direction we need to go, and then find the consensus that something that will pass the House, pass the Senate. We passed a good bill through the House 2 times, but the Senate wouldn't deal with it. 2 times, and so I hope we can find something that would have a little broader coalition, yet not upset the balance that we had in order to finish and be successful with, we had a really careful balance there. We had labor at the table, we had ag and the commodities all at the table, and had pretty darn good sign-off on that. And although, it wasn't as, not every region of the country was necessarily happy with it. So, But it's the best we could do right now, and it's something we continue to work on. That's why the task force will be helpful and say, well, we want that input. What can we have that we can come up with and have it remain bipartisan and effective?
And each region of the country is so different in some of their needs and different in agriculture.
Yeah.
Is it a lofty goal to try to please everybody?
Well, are you pleasing everybody, or are you making some less annoyed than others, or what have you, So it's really got to be a bit of all the above, and some people accept, like, hey, I might not get everything I can do today, but there's nothing in that's harmful to me. Then maybe we'll come back to the table later and try and see how this works. Like there's folks that wanted a greater amount of labor that is in the processing portion of the industry to be in that, and that was something that was not quite attainable with the coalition and the balance we had. So it's like, well, let's work through this, and we'll show everybody this can work well, and then maybe the next layer of that can be some more of the processing side, because there's folks in labor that are concerned about that, and so we're trying to have a positive spirit on that and not try and cram something down, one side or the other's throat of the discussion, because then no one's going to be happy at the end when it fails,
Right. With this being a Farm Bill year, there's focus in other areas as well. Is it harder to focus on agriculture? Is it harder to focus on just the issue of labor when there are so many other agricultural issues that are also being brought to the table at this time?
We ought to be able to walk and chew gum at the same time in Congress, don't you think? So it's a matter of we've been preoccupied with a lot of other things with debt ceiling, and there's going to be the Appropriations Committee process is going to be very comprehensive, and I hope it's effective, because appropriations are the way that we're supposed to spend, not just ad hoc, omnibuses or continuing resolutions. Those are poor ways of doing business. So I'm actually happy that Speaker McCarthy is leading us in that direction of having an effective appropriations process. There's going to be the defense authorization. There's a lot of stuff to do. So, that's why we're broken into committees to handle different things. That's why his task force is going to be important. And this is stuff we can work on, because I work on ag, I work on resources and the transportation infrastructure, but also want to do my part on helping this task force. So.
All right. Well, I don't want to take up any more of your time unless you have a final comment that you'd like for our listeners to know.
It's a matter of there's the will. There's the will in Congress amongst the House members to find a way on that. I think we have to take an approach that's going to be a little more broader in order to be successful than what we had last time. Congress has changed, the House has changed somewhat, so our effort's going to have to look a little bit different. And so I want to help forge that content so that we can be successful. And because it's going to need to be bipartisan, it's going to need to be interregional, And so we need everybody in good faith at the table say, hey, what do you need and what can you live with,
Once again, thank you to Representative Doug LaMalfa for the call. Now, I did write up an article on this topic as well, and you can find that on our websites, southeastagnet.com and agnetwest.com. That's this week's AgNet Weekly. I'm Sabrina Halvorson. Thanks for tuning in.